So good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this instruction course on clinical low vision. Can you see my slides?
Yes, sir, very clear.
Wonderful. So we bring to you this instruction course from the beautiful city of Jodhpur, which is the jewel of the great Indian Thar Desert. So my colleagues and I are from this lovely city. So welcome to the instruction course. To begin with, I would like to tell you that the specialty of low vision is very poorly represented in our country. And that is the reason why the twin goals of this instruction course are to understand the concept of low vision and its treatment, and to develop the necessary clinical skills to identify and treat low vision cases in our day-to-day practice. So visual impairment has got a devastating effect on the quality of life of an individual, and it has economic, social, as well as health consequences. So rehabilitation of such person is essential to enable them to develop normal daily living skills so that they can lead their lives productively and independently. And rehabilitation is a comprehensive service which comprises of functional evaluation, clinical examination, optical and non-optical aid evaluation, patient education and instruction, and proper follow-up care. So the goals of low vision management are basically to make an individual maximize their visual potential by offering them increased functionality and linking them to community resources and support with the provision of low vision aids and education. Rehabilitation is actually a joint task which is performed by an ophthalmologist, an optometrist, and a rehabilitationist. And all of them has got specific tasks, like the ophthalmologist evaluates the patient clinically, assesses what types of low vision aids are required, specifically taking into account the type of disease the person has, the prognosis of the disease, and whether he will require any surgery or medical treatment, surgical or medical treatment later on in the future. And the job of the optometrist is to provide the best possible refraction and actually dispense the low vision aids. Now, the idea behind this course is to make you amalgamate the low vision skills of an optometrist and an ophthalmologist so that the participant is able to provide low vision aids to almost 80% of the people who come to him. Now, this course is divided into 6 different sessions or sections, beginning from definition and epidemiology to the principles of treatment through to the latest technology in the field of low vision. And I now hand over the mic to my colleague, Dr. Ghulam Ali, to conduct the second session or the second section of this instruction course. Over to you, Dr. Ali.
Good afternoon, everyone. May I audible?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. I start my part of this instruction course with this beautiful quote by Brian Tracy. The more you learn, more you earn, and more self-confidence you will have. So please learn carefully to monetize incorporating today's learning in your practice. Let us begin with the definition of low vision. WHO first defined 6 categories of visual impairment in 1973. According to them, visual acuity in the range of 360 to 618 were considered low vision because of fallacies in the previous definition. Working group of WHO met in 1992 and also adopted category 3 and 4 to be included as a low vision. So the working definition is a person has low vision if best corrected visual acuity in the better eye less than 618 2pl or visual field of less than 10 degree from fixation, but who uses or he is potentially able to use vision for planning or execution of the task. with low vision is legally blind at person current point in time, as there is no surgical and medical treatment available to improve vision, and they are eligible for all government benefit made for visually impaired patients. Although they are legally blind, but they are not totally blind because they have some residual vision. Looking at residual function in such patients, the Government of India came up with the functional definition of low vision, which is this. A person with low vision means a person with impairment of visual functioning even after treatment or standard refractive correction, but who uses or is potentially capable of using vision for the planning or execution of tasks with appropriate assistive devices. So in essence, low vision is a level of visual disability that causes difficulty in carrying out everyday tasks. And its consequences are debilitating and include loss of self-esteem, depression, injury, and mortality, and it incurs a lot of expenses on taxpayers. Then the question is, why do so many patients go untreated? This is because there are so many barriers to low vision treatment, which can be seen in these slides, so on, like lack of training, knowledge in low vision care, lack of awareness about low vision services, non-availability of LVDs, lack of motivations. Low vision care is time consuming, busy in providing general ophthalmology services, particularly cataract surgeries. Low vision care is not decorative. Low vision services are not effective in helping patients. Recent study by WHO demonstrated that there are 253 million pupils are visually impaired, out of which 217 million pupils are moderate to severe visually impaired. This is the global map showing prevalence of low vision. Prevalence of the low vision in India is 1.05%, and it falls in the category of moderate prevalence. These are some causes of low vision, like retinitis pigmentosa, coloboma, degenerative myopia, age-related macular degeneration, diabetic retinopathy, optic neuropathy, cataract, infections, and corneal obesities. In this section, we have learned definition of LVI, consequences of low vision impairment, prevalence of low vision impairment, and we have learned about barrier to low vision, which we need to overcome. Thank you. Now I invite Dr. Anas to present principle of low vision treatment. Dr. Anas, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. Myself, Dr. Mohammad Anas Pathan. I'll be continuing with the principles of the treatment of low vision. There are the three basic principles to increase vision in low vision patient. First is to increase the definition and sharpness of image by refraction and spectacle correction. Second is by increasing illumination. Third is by increasing the size of the object, either physically or by prescribing magnification. These are the principles. First is refraction. We can prescribe the glass for near and for distance also. Only 10% patient can respond for that. Second, we can give the magnification like telescope, magnifier, CCTV, large screen. And third, contrast and illumination. That we will discuss in the further slides. On refraction, increase visual acuity to create a sharp retinal image. 10% of cases respond to a change in refraction. Now magnification. Magnification increases the retinal spread of the image to look around the scotoma. As one goes away from the center of the fovea, the visual acuity drops. 1 mm away from it, the visual acuity is 40%, like about 6/12. 4 mm away, it is 20%, like 6/36. The extrafoveal retina cannot interpret detail of object with the same clarity of the fovea, but even this poor peripheral vision can be used to see if the image were to fall on it. That's exactly what magnification does. It increases the retinal image size so that peripheral area of the retinal can perceive it. The increased retinal spread decreases the relative effect of the scotoma. The extrafoveal retina receives an enlarged, slightly blurred, imperfect image, but it's a functionally useful image. Few conditions are exception, like retinitis pigmentosa, where there is a peripheral degeneration. This is the schematic to illustrate the effect of the magnification. Higher the magnification, bigger the image and retinal spread, better is the patient able to see. What is light illumination? These are the listed few conditions in which in few conditions we have to enhance the illumination, and few conditions we have to decrease the illumination. Like in pathological myopia, optic atrophy, aphakia, maculopathies, in this condition we have to increase the illumination. And like albinism, achromatopsia, cataract, and few maculopathies, in this condition we have to decrease the illumination for the better. Contrast enhancement. Another aspect of the light and visual perception is contrast sensitivity. Contrasts are more important to a visual impairment person than to a sighted person. Spatial orientation, daily living skills are heavily dependent on contrast in the life of a visual impairment person. Like we can see in this. Yeah, contrast enhancement also, in which we can use and we can guide the patient to use. If they are using the dark object like a coffee and all, they can use the light utensil, and the vice versa also. Yeah, these are the few conditions which can be treated with low vision aids, like progressive myopia, hereditary macular degeneration, nystagmus, albinism, non-proliferative diabetic retinopathy, and congenital atrophy, etc. And these are the conditions which cannot be treated by low vision aids, like proliferative diabetic retinopathy, hypertensive retinopathy, central retinal artery occlusion, and central retinal vein occlusion. This is the clinical evaluation, how we evaluate the patient who come with the low vision in our OPD. Where the most important is to take the proper history of the patient, what the patients require, what his or her requirement or need. According to that, will prescribe the low vision, whether it's the refraction, magnification, or contrast sensitivity. And this is all listed in how we start with the history, and then a clinical examination, visual acuity, refraction, color vision, and we will trial of the LVA, low vision aids, which one is suitable for the patient according to the patient needs, follow up, and we keep the record of the patient for regular follow-up. This is the one of the chart. In our OPD, we used to do that, the detailed history of the patient, and we maintain the record, and we keep on the regular follow-up of the patient. Thank you. And in this session, we have learned about the basic principle of the treatment. And the most important is the history taking, how we take the history and all. It is very important to take a proper history of the patient and understand what he needs, his or her requirement, and prescribe and guide the patient according to that. Thank you very much. Now I'll invite Dr. Vivek Singha sir to continue further. Thank you.
So, good afternoon, everyone. I'm pretty sure I'm visible to everyone. Is it okay? Am I audible?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, I thank my colleague, Dr. Mohammad Anas Pathan, to inviting me, and precisely and concisely explaining the principles of low vision aid. So now I'll be discussing types of low vision aids we have with us, so that we can go in further details of how to use them and where to use them. So we have a wide variety of low vision devices that can help people with low vision see better. So we have classified them in optical aids and non-optical aids. Some of them help see things for near, and some for seeing distant objects. These are not all purpose aids, but for specific purposes only. They maximize the remaining vision to enjoy the daily activities and hobbies. So we will be considering all these facts in the later slides before discussing any type of low vision aids. So all these low vision aids work on the principle of magnifying the image to such levels that the patient can appreciate the image. So this can be done in two ways: by simply increasing the object size, called object magnification, or the image magnification, which is done via approach magnification or the angular magnification. So larger the visual angle, larger is the retinal spread. So in approach magnification, the subject or the patient brings the object closer to the eyes, so that the image relative magnification occur based on the distance. It is used mostly by the children as they have larger amplitude of accommodation. So distance optical devices mainly consist of telescopes. These work on the principle of angular magnification. Based on their designs, they are of two types. Out of them, Galilean type is preferred the most as it is shorter and portable, despite having lower magnification and smaller field of view. But whenever we need more magnification and larger field of view, we prefer the Keplerian one. So distance telescopes can be handheld or spectacle mounted. Handheld ones are the usually monoocular ones, and spectacle mounted ones can be monoocular or the binocular. Spectacle mounted can be in the range of 2 to 8x. The advantages of telescope is that they are the only optical system for distance vision, but they provide dramatic visual improvement. But their heavy design and expensive, as they are expensive, and they have poor field of view and poor depth of perception, they have their own limitations. So in this scatter diagram conducted by the study by our chief instructor, Dr. Sanjeev Desai, we can see that the distance vision can be improved for 160 to 624. So these are the spectacle magnifiers which work on the principle of relative distance magnification. User bring the subject closer to the eyes at correct focal length to see the things better. They allow widest field of view as compared to other aids. Because of their familiarity, they are the most accepted ones, and as both the ends are free, manual dexterity allows us to do more things. And they are useful in cases of tremors. But because of the limited working distance, there is obstruction in the reading speeds as well as in the illumination. And because of the uncomfortable posture, this leads to fatigue if they are used for longer periods. And they are not good for patients with eccentric fixation also. We also have handheld magnifiers. These are useful especially for patients for short-term spot reading. And they are quite inexpensive and easily available. And they have comparatively greater working distance and magnification as compared to the spectacle magnifiers. But they have limited field of view and the hands are occupied with this device. For the patients with the problems of tremors and arthritis, we have stand magnifiers, but they cannot be used on uneven surfaces. So here is a picture of a gentleman with only eye, and the seeing eye has advanced glaucoma. He is tolerating well the high plus lenses to see the near objects. In the right side image, you can see a patient with myopic macular degeneration faring well with the binocular high plus lenses. This gentleman actually completed his graduation and acquired a gainful job with the uses of these magnifiers. And on the left side, we can see a monoocular high plus lens. So the telemicroscopes or the spectacle mounted telescopes are also a good tool because they have comparatively normal working distance and they are lightweight and they are cosmetically more acceptable, and both the ends are free, and they also allow the patient to do the writing job which is not possible with the spectacle magnifiers. We also have bar magnifier which gives us more field of view, and dome magnifier which has the advantage of self-illumination. So CCTV, this is another a very good tool where high magnification is required because all the previous devices, they provide a magnification of up to 20x, but with CCTVs we can get the magnification of 40x. Here this device actually enlarges the image and projects it onto the screen. So we can adjust the size, brightness and even contrast of the text. And another good feature with this device is reverse polarity. That means it can project the white letters on the black background. So it can work well for few patients who are not tolerating the other modalities. We also have large print softwares like Zoom Text and Fusion with JAWS, which helps us seeing the text images better. And there are other options in Microsoft Word and Excel, which enlarges the image, and it helps the patients with low vision tremendously. So this is another scatter diagram of another study by our chief instructor, which shows how the near visual acuity can be improved with the low vision aids. Here we can see from N48, the vision improved to N6. So if you are planning to start a new low vision aid clinic, these are the most important and quite cheap financially devices, which actually helps most of the patients attending the low vision clinic. So whenever you are starting, you have to own at least these 3 devices to prescribe to the patients. Now, today, this is a world of smartphones. So actually smartphones are now coming up with many apps which magnifies the image and help the patients with low vision performing these tasks on the phones in a much efficient way. So now coming to non-optical aids, these all utilize the principle of object magnification, where the large print text is used, like Reader's Digest is available with large font size, the watches with large dials and remote controls with large prints on it. We can also utilize other non-optical devices like by contrast enhancement. With the help of typoscope, we can improve the visual acuity or visual performance, or by substituting the sensory stimulation by talking watches, or tactile substitute by braille, or the writing guides or the signature guides. Since mobility is a very big problem with the patients with low vision aids, so we have ultrasonic canes which offer a range of 4 meters in front of the patient, and this system actually causes the cane to vibrate whenever there is an obstacle in front of the patient. So they offer some mobility to the patient. So here I will be taking a break. In this lecture, we have discussed various types of low vision aids and their advantages and disadvantages. So I would like to invite my colleague Dr. Sanjeev Desai, so how we can use these low vision aids for patients with all the problems. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vivek, for this excellent discussion on the wide variety and gamut of low vision devices available in the market. And now we come to the really exciting part. We're going to skip this. Oops, so where did it go? And we come to the next section, which is how do you prescribe low vision aids? So that is what everyone is asking and what all of you participants might be very keen and excited to learn. So now there are 4 steps in providing low vision devices to a patient. Step number 1 is to record the vision. Step number 2 is to predict what magnification of device should be given to the patient. And step number 3 is to select the appropriate device. And the last step is training the client in using the device. So here is a testing kit which we use in our hospital. It's a Keeler set, one for distance and one consisting of telescopes for telescopes and the other telescopes and glasses for near correction. But these 2 kits are very expensive, and I would not recommend them to you to use, because a lot of cheap and good devices are available, kits are available in the Indian market. So we'd rather go for them. We'll discuss more about those Indian devices and kits later on in this presentation. So there are basically 2 ways of how to record vision of a low vision patient. The first is that you have to have huge optotypes, like you see in the left-hand schematic. And this is not practical to have these kind of huge wall-mounted optotypes in the clinic. So the other more practical way to do it is to, one, either have special charts made for shorter reading distances, or use the regular chart that we have in our clinics, the Snellen chart, and record vision on that chart. And that last principle is what we follow in our clinic, also in our practice. But for the purpose of completeness of discussion, I'm going to show you a few pictures of the special low vision charts that are available in the market. This is the Keeler distant visual acuity testing chart, and this is the Keeler near vision testing chart. And both of them also have a predictive value, but let us not go into all the details. Just look at the pictures for completeness. And this is the Bailey-Lowy chart, which is for distant visual measurement, and it's a logMAR based chart. And these are also logMAR charts for near vision testing. On the left is the Minnesota Read chart, and the right is the Lighthouse chart. But as I said, we measure vision of low vision patients with a regular Snellen chart, which is found in our clinics. And we test it at a shorter distance. Instead of 20 feet, we test it at 10 feet or 5 feet, or whatever distance the patient is comfortable reading the chart. And then we convert the measured acuity into Snellen notations. To give you an example, you can look at the last line of this slide. So supposing a patient is sitting at 3 meter distance from the chart and can read the third line, his vision will be recorded as 3/24. And then you use a suitable number to convert this into a regular Snellen notation. And in this example, it turns out to be 6/48. So that is the Snellen vision recorded on a regular, normal Snellen chart found in all clinics worldwide. So far, so good. So once you've found out the patient vision, you have to prescribe him low vision devices. So there are certain principles to follow. And the first and most important one is that you give him a device which is, first you give him a spectacle correction. And as Dr. Anush Pathan has told you earlier, spectacles will increase the sharpness of the retinal image and make him see better. The second thing to remember is to avoid distant low vision aids if the mobility is good, because if you give a high magnifying telescope, then the mobility is hampered in such individuals. So avoid telescopes if the mobility is good. Distant vision is good enough for allowing mobility in the general environment. The third principle is to prescribe a low vision device which has the lowest useful magnification. Now, how do you determine the magnification? That is the key question. And there are actually 2 ways of doing it. First is the rule of the thumb, and the second way to do it is to actually calculate and predict the magnification. So the rule of the thumb is that if the visual acuity of a patient is more than 6/60, then usually he would require a 2.5x magnifying telescope. And if the visual acuity is less than 6/60, then generally such a patient would require 6 or 8x magnification in the telescope. So this is the rule of the thumb to predict the required magnification. The other way to do it is to actually calculate the magnification required. And this is done by first setting a target acuity. You can ask the patient what kind of vision he requires, but if the patient is undecided or you are undecided what target acuity should be, then you can take 612 as a ballpark figure and use this formula, which is magnification required is the desired visual acuity divided by the current visual acuity to arrive at the magnification required. So in this example, which I have mentioned here, if the vision of the patient is 660 and you need to improve it to 6.6, then the magnification required would be 10x. So that's a simple way of how to calculate and predict the magnification required. But whatever rule you use, whether rule of the thumb or a calculation method, and you arrive at a magnification, you have to test the patient with one magnification stepped up and one magnification stepped down and prescribe the low vision device with which the patient is most comfortable with. So likewise, you can also predict the magnification required for near vision devices. And this can be done with the Kestenbaum's rule, which Dr. Kestenbaum formulated in the early 1950s. And according to his rule, if you want to increase the vision of a patient to N8 reading vision, which is good enough to read newspaper print, then you take the reciprocal of his distant visual acuity, and that is the dioptric power of the lens required to produce magnification for him. So in our example, if the vision is 6/60, then if we take the reciprocal of this, then the magnification required would be about 10 diopters or 2.5x, which is good enough to read newsprint. Now to improve the vision furthermore to N6, you multiply the residual vision or reciprocal vision by a factor of 1.4. And for reading N4 or J1, you multiply the reciprocal vision by a factor of 2.8. Now, while you do this, remember that patient also has some kind of accommodation. So you have to subtract the accommodation arbitrarily from this predicted magnification. So for instance, if a child is about 10 years old, then you deduct an accommodation of 8 diopters. And if it's the child is about, of the person is about 20 years old, then you deduct about 6 diopters of accommodation. And at age 50, you deduct about 1 diopter from the calculated value. Now, once you arrive at a magnification for near, how exactly do you prescribe a low vision aid? So for this, one must remember that the first choice should always be a spectacle magnifier for the reasons which have been elaborated very beautifully by Dr. Vivek Singhal. The second choice, of course, would be a hand magnifier. And remember to give stand magnifiers only if the patient has tremors or arthritis and has to do prolonged tasks. Telemicroscopes are prescribed if extended working distances are required. And large print books are recommended when a person can read text which is less than 18 point, even with high ads at least 2 inches distance from the object of regard. CCTVs are prescribed when 18-point text is not visible with high ads of plus 32 diopters. And if all of these fail, then the patient is put up on braille. The final step in prescribing low vision aids to offer training to the patient in use of the device. So you have the patient come to the clinic and give him the device to use, have him bring some reading material and newspapers or his favorite magazines to read in the hospital and see how he does with the device. Make him move around with the telescope, take him outside the clinic and make him spot distant objects like trees or signboards. And if the patient is comfortable and you and the patient are both satisfied with the device, then you make the final prescription. So the next question which comes to everybody's mind is, where do I get low vision devices and low vision testing kits from? And there are a number of sources available in our country. And the oldest one is Baliwala and Homi from Bombay. Madhu Instruments in Delhi, and Akriti Oculoplastics from Hyderabad, and Lensel Optics in Pune are some of the other sources from where you can buy kits and low vision devices. But remember one thing, low vision rehabilitation is interdisciplinary. And supposing you have a patient who is multiply handicapped or has profound visual loss, especially if it's a child, then you will have to consult other professionals also, like medical other medical specialists, social workers, special teachers, and occupational therapists. So if you have such a patient, then do not hesitate to refer him to the appropriate specialist. And here is a slide to show you that many places have tactile floors and tactile pavements, especially if you go to advanced countries like Germany, Japan, or America. Even the pavements or the sidewalks in these countries have tactile floors, so the persons with profound visual loss can move around easily. And on the right-hand side, you see pictures of when my new clinic was being constructed, and I had this contrast line incorporated in all the walls, so low vision clients would be able to navigate the galleries in my hospital very easily. So this brings us to the next slide. We're all clinicians and we want to know what is new and what is going to happen in the very near future in the field of low vision. And so we come to another exciting section of this talk. And the first thing that we should know is that these special contact lenses, which offer a magnification of 2.8x, are available, not exactly available, they are being researched by the US military. And they are PMMA lenses, which is central 2.4 millimeter hole through which a patient has a normal vision. And then when you put a polarizing glass in front of the eye, as you can see over here in the bottom, then what happens is that you have these diffraction rings all around the central hole. So when you put a polarizing filter in front of this contact lens, then the pathway of light coming into the lens is changed to the periphery on the sides over here and passes through this refractive rings. And when they pass through the refractive rings, a magnification of 2.8x is produced on the retina. So once you take off the polarizing lenses, then once again the patient gets normal 1x vision. So those were only experimental devices meant for use by US military. It won't be available in commercial market for quite some time now. And this is a very small spectacle mounted device made by an Israeli company called Orcam, and it uses artificial intelligence and augmented reality to capture images from the environment via a small spectacle mounted camera over here. And it reads out menu charts and whatever is present in the environment, also produces a magnified image of what you see. So it's a very handy, portable, small, high resolution device. Now, implantable telescopes, miniature telescopes have been around for about more than 2 decades now, but they were FDA approved only in 2010. And since very few people implant them worldwide, it is interesting to learn a little bit more about them. They are these thick Galilean telescopes which have been miniaturized and can be implanted in patients' eyes. The only thing to remember is that you can only implant it in one eye because the other eye has to be used for peripheral vision and navigation with the peripheral vision which is present in that eye. And in one eye, you can implant this telescope to give you magnification. And these are used for patients who've got very poor vision, like 20/800. They can be implanted only unilaterally in cases of age-related macular degeneration. Now, an improvement over the IMT is the Lipschitz mirror implant, which works on the principle of the Cassegrain telescope. As you can see here, there are 2 mirrors in this kind of telescope to produce magnification. And this implant is much smaller than the IMT, and it's got 2 mirrors, and this is the central aperture through which light enters. The periphery is regular and optically neutral, so that peripheral vision is maintained, and the central area provides the magnified image. So it has got dual optics in a way, and a lens can be implanted in both the eyes bilaterally in contrast to the previous one. And we are going to skip this because this is just a schematic to show you how it looks like when it is implanted in the patient's eye. And the latest kid on the block is the Chariot's macular lens. It is a foldable bifocal lens which is implanted in the ciliary sulcus over an existing lens. So if a patient has AMD and cannot do near tasks beautifully, you can implant this lens. It has an optical zone which has got a dioptric correction or dioptric addition of plus 10 diopters. So it produces magnified image for near tasks like reading and writing. Then from the realm of science fiction, we now come into the age where bionic eye has become a real life thing. And the Argus 2 apparetal implant by Humayun Group is one of the most popular actually commercially available apparatal implants. And what actually is done is that here there is a small camera which is mounted on a spectacle, and it captures images from the environment and sends it to this video processing unit, which a patient can keep in his pocket. And signals from here are sent into this antenna, which transmits it wirelessly to a device mounted on the equator of the patient's eye. And from here, the signals go into an epiretinal implant. This implant is about 60 electrodes which are impinging upon the epiretina, and when they are stimulated, they produce phosphines. So vision in the form of phosphines are presented to the patient, and the patient is able to recognize objects in pixelated form or phosphine form, and it takes about 2 to 3 seconds to recognize an object. So these are some experiments which they did with the epiretinal implant. They have got a huge number of patients now, and this is the epiretinal implant in place, and this is the experimental setup where patients were able to identify letters and small size letters also. They could recognize written words, and letters as high as 9 millimeters could be read at 30 centimeter distances. And some patients could also read unrehearsed words. So this is really very impressive. Now work is going on to improve the resolution of the Argus 2 implant, and they are going to come up with Argus 3 soon. And the idea is to improve the number of electrodes from 60 to about 1,000 electrodes, and improve the resolution from 60 pixels to about 200 pixels, and go from phosphine vision to actual facial recognition. So this is sometime in the future. Work is going on for the last 4 or 5 years. Let us see what they come up with in the future. Now there's a group which has succeeded in using induced pluripotent stem cells to produce 3-dimensional retinal cup with all 10 layers, and they have grown this in a culture in a petri dish, and they have functional photoreceptors in them. So this is really very exciting research which is being done, and sometime in the future we could also have actual retinas with all 10 layers intact implanted in a patient's eye who's got profound visual loss, even no PL vision or PL vision only. Now there's another group which has done gene therapy and transferred genes into rodents who were blind congenitally, and they have succeeded in transforming the neural cells of the retina into becoming rod cells. So this is really exciting. Sometime in the future, maybe 10 years or 15 years down the line, we might have double gene therapy for human candidates also who have congenital stationary night blindness or retinitis pigmentosa, so that they're able to see better. So you might have seen the movie Terminator and its sequel, where a lot of cyborgs populate the film world. And with all the experimentations which are being done now in the field of low vision, we are not far when we will also be cyborgs so far as visual impairment and correction of low vision is concerned. Thank you very much for your attention. And if there are any questions, we are ready to take them now. Thank you. So if there are no questions, we can actually take up another section which we quite omitted in this. We thought that we would run out of time. And so we actually omitted one section which has to do with light, contrast, and contrast enhancement. See, contrast is very important for low vision patients. Even for us normal patients, it is important for good spatial orientation and mobility. And it is more important for low vision clients where contrast is lost, especially in age-related macular degeneration and glaucoma. So let's talk a little bit about how to increase the contrast in illumination. As Dr. Anash has already told you, there are certain conditions which require a higher level of illuminations for low vision clients. So this is a table which tells you what kind of illumination is required for normal people. So for reading, we require about 400 lux. For sewing, we require about 600 lux. And watchmaking requires about 2000 lux or so. So for normally, we require about 400 to 600 lux of illumination. But a low vision patient to do the same tasks will require about 1000 lux of illumination. So that can very easily be provided by offering high intensity diffuse illumination to low vision patients by either natural daylight or by artificial lights. So natural daylight, you make the patient sit near a window, and on a bright day, the patient will receive 10,000 lux of illumination on reading material or near tasks. And on a cloudy day, you would require 2000 lux of illumination, which is quite adequate for near vision tasks. So that is one way of utilizing natural light to provide high intensity illumination. The other way to do it is with artificial light. And for that, the best thing to do is to use a gooseneck lamp because you can adjust the distance and the focus of the lamp. And you can use this formula to calculate what wattage of lamp you would use in this device to provide 1000 or more lux of illumination to low vision patients. So using this formula, you can see that for 100 watts, and if you need to provide 1000 lux of illumination, you have to keep the lamp 1 foot distance from the object of regard or book to be read. And if you want 2000 lux of illumination, you can use a 200 watt bulb at 1 foot distance. And for 8000 lux of illumination, you can use a 200 watt bulb at 6 inches distance from the object of regard. Now, there are certain other things that we need to consider when you're using artificial light sources. And one is that you never use a flickering light source. Because if you use a single tube light, there's an electrical discharge which goes on and off all the time and which produces flicker, which produces fatigue and accommodative fatigue in the patient. And to overcome that, you always have multiple tubes which you prescribe to a patient, not a single tube anytime. The second thing is source deterioration, especially in tungsten bulbs. The filament loses its integrity after a certain length of time. So you need to clean bulbs because dust settles over bulbs. So you need to clean them frequently and change the bulb because of tungsten filament loss. Now always choose an incandescent bulb like this over fluorescent lamp. Why? Because fluorescent lamp emits ultraviolet and blue light. So blue light is detrimental for contrast sensitivity. And if there is a lot of blue light emission, then patient's contrast will be lost. And we know that loss of contrast is very detrimental for patients with low vision. So here is the emission spectrum of an incandescent bulb, which we use normally. You can see there's a smooth increase in the emission, and most of the emission is in the red and infrared area of the spectrum. And there's very little blue light emission. So there's very little loss of contrast when you use incandescent bulbs. So these are the best bulbs to use for low vision patients. And this is the emission spectrum of a CFL bulb, and this one is of the LED bulbs, which are very much in vogue nowadays because of their low use of power and saving of power and long-term saving in costs. But look at the blue light peaks over here. Huge peak here and a bigger peak in LED lights. So this produces loss of contrast. So LED and CFL bulbs should never be used for low vision patients. Now, glare and contrast need to be addressed too in low vision patients. Glare can be due to natural light or artificial lights. So outdoors, one can use hats with a wide brim or sunglasses or visors. And indoors, one can use blinds and curtains or tinted glasses on windows to cut down on glare. Then, to enhance contrast, one can use absorptive filters in sunglasses. And they are gray, amber and orange, and yellow in color. So here are the properties of these different absorptive filters. The gray ones are always Polaroid in nature, and the amber, orange, and yellow are made out of polycarbonate. Now, all of them block ultraviolet rays 100%, and the gray ones, which are Polaroids, are the best anti-glare filters to be used outdoors. And the amber and orange ones are ideal for contrast enhancement. And the yellow filters are very important for contrast enhancement in indoor environments, especially for reading and watching TV. But the disadvantage of these absorptive filters are that in amber and orange, the blue colors appear black and green colors are not seen. So remember that and explain this to the patients when you're prescribing filters. And that actually brings us to the end of this instruction course. Thank you very much for your patient listening. And if there are any questions, we are free to answer all your queries. So shoot your questions now. Are there no queries? Sorry, I didn't hear you. Say that again.
I don't think so, sir. I cannot see any question and answers as well.
All right, wonderful. If that is the case, then we'll close the instruction course and exit the session. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir.